Hey there, welcome back to The Empowered Edge, the podcast where we cut through the noise, ditch the overwhelm, and unlock your best self through optimal health, a resilient mindset, and habits that actually last. I'm your host, Jenna Hostetler, registered dietitian, certified neurocoach, and proud obsessor of all things psychology and leadership. Every week, you'll get practical, science-backed strategies that give you the clarity and confidence to take action, break through barriers, and most importantly, own your health, own your life, and live with purpose. Hey there. Okay, if you've ever taken a food sensitivity test, I need you to listen up. Today I'm sitting down with Amanda Rigby, a functional dietitian, to break down why avoiding foods those tests that you're supposedly sensitive to is not the solution you think it is. We're also diving into some hidden signs that your gut is out of balance and what to do about it. This is a fascinating discussion, so let's get right into it.
Today's special guest is Amanda Rigby, the founder of Heal Thyself Nutrition. Amanda is a licensed registered dietitian with a focus on functional medicine and gut health and identifying the root causes of gut health, which is a huge thing in the industry is, getting out of that managed symptom cycle and figuring out what's really going on. So I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
So you mentioned 4 reasons, why we get sick, but why we stay sick. And some of those are chronic inflammation, that emotional trauma and stress, environmental toxins, and heavy metals. So how does a person get exposed to toxic amounts of heavy metals?
Yeah, I think those are kind of the 4 core. Everything can be traced back to one of those 4. And surprisingly, even in gut health, which is kind of eye-opening for me, we can correlate heavy metals and that overload of toxicity to specific disease states there too, and infections or overgrowths like candida. And the way that we get exposed to these things is just living in our 21st century. There was actually a study done called the 10 Americans study by the Environmental Working Group. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was very interesting. It studied the umbilical cord blood of 10 babies, just spaced all throughout the country. And there were 287 different toxic chemicals found in the umbilical cord blood. So we're like coming into the world already starting pretty overloaded. They tied 180 of those 287 to cancer-causing carcinogenic toxins that they studied in humans and animals. So that was proven of 180 of them. 217 of them were neurotoxins, so to the brain and the nervous system. And 208 of them caused birth defects in animal studies. So we are coming out the gates, out of mom, already exposed to so many different things. Where is this stuff coming from is essentially the question, right? How are we getting so overly exposed? And of course, food is a source of things. Our stuff's getting sprayed, manipulated more so than ever. Our water's really dirty and inheriting a lot of other things from however we're flushing, or, the quality of the air is some level of toxic. The plastic stuff that we store our food in, the dishware that we cook our food on releases some metals that can seep into our food. The skincare we're using, the body washes we're using, the cleaner for our countertops, like we're just kind of overloaded with so much toxic things. It's a little like detrimental to talk about. It's kind of depressing. But to see it in that study was really eye-opening. And we know, to tie them back to just disease states in general, that they accumulate mainly in the brain and in our liver. And if we're unable to process them as rapidly as we may have been able to back in the day when either the volume was lower, we didn't have so much, overburden, other things to slow our liver down, like alcohol, medications, crappy food, we'd be able to get them out easier. But now we're kind of having both perfect storm of subpar food choices with this, abundance of toxins that we're not clearing them well. And we're just seeing that show up as the symptoms that our patients are coming to us with, whether it's the brain fog and memory issues, not inability to stay focused. See this a lot with our kids now with the autism rising and things like that. We're seeing food sensitivities, chemical sensitivities that we haven't seen before, the headaches, the numbness, the neuropathy, people losing their hair. We're more infertile than ever nowadays, and it can all be tied back to the exposure to all of these toxins. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So are there any tests that can be done or that you do to kind of see what's going on with people, or is it just like a process of elimination?
Yeah, I would say the time when people get to us, our patients are coming to us, the theme I see in my practice is that they have been passed around from practitioner to practitioner, office to office with these unknown symptoms, and no one's able to really pinpoint what's going on. The patient knows they don't feel good, and they're having a harder and harder time articulating it as they continue to get passed from person to person. That's just like, I don't know why you don't feel great. So when they do get to me, as much as I almost like to assume, right? I can assume we're loaded with toxins. I just know our environment, right? So we all can assume that. I can assume, maybe our diet is subpar in certain areas because of maybe where we live or, what our lifestyle is like, those kind of stressors as well. So there's a lot we can do with just basic assumption, a lot we can change for somebody. But I really do at this point, just at the point where the patient is, they've tried everything, they've been passed around so many times, they're really just looking for the answer. And I do find that certain testing can give them that answer. So we call it test to don't guess. This person has been doing this on their own, or they've been passed around and they've been told, pull this out, add this in. And they're just like, see if that works, and just doing their own kind of trial and error. And they're so tired and arguably getting sicker and more malnourished as they completely, eliminate whole food groups or just wean themselves down to these handful of foods that they're comfortable with at that point. So a good gold standard stool test, we use the GI map, is very telling. I find that finally gives the answers that we're looking for, whether it's an infection like an H. pylori or a parasite, yeast overgrowth, an overall imbalance of good bugs or bad bugs, and undergrowth of either of those. We can see worms, bugs, all these different things, the inability to digest food. We can see maybe fats coming out in their stool, so showing a low stomach acid production. So that's really where we can start to work from. And that's kind of what, pulling those layers back and identifying the root of the person's symptoms of that bloating, of that gas and stuff, is seeing like maybe there's a lot of yeast in here, or maybe they picked up E. coli somewhere, and we can just actually see that through a pretty deep stool test like that. So that one is a big one in my practice, again, just to kind of get to the answer, right? Maybe we can have them through assumption, take out inflammatory things and identify potential triggers, but to really know there's a worm, there's something running, causing havoc in there, that's the best way to find that. I like a Dutch test for hormones, or specifically, we can see a lot done with males too. I shouldn't count them out, but I guess I work primarily with females. But as far as helping with that, like fertility awareness and mood and depression, there's a lot of hormonal stuff, barriers to weight loss that we can see through a Dutch, which is a urine hormone test. Some dietitians are certified, like myself, in food sensitivity testing through the MRT test, which is, again, kind of the only validated, clinically studied one. I know you can buy them off the TV nowadays, but I would not recommend that, just because now I find that's pushing people more towards that really tiny list of foods that they revolve around, instead of getting to the root cause, because I'm not sure what those tests are even, how they're getting those answers, but people are coming back with laundry lists of things. Do not eat this. And I'm like, oh God. And then of course they're like, what's left? I can eat, I don't know, rice and bananas for the rest of my life. So there's no plan to get out of that, to reintroduce. It's just a mess. So I would definitely, recommend working with someone who's been trained to read them and then take you out of that restriction as well. We can get a lot done through basic lab work too. I think if you have a trained practitioner able to kind of review some of your recent labs and look at them against each other, not just in isolation, I think we can see a lot of trends there and kind of jump in there as well. So a lot of testing possibilities for sure. Genetics is a lot. That one's really cool. It's my new jam.
Okay, before I go on to genetics, because that's super
I know,
interesting.
sorry, just open a whole
I know.
universe.
So back to the food sensitivity testing.
Yes.
So I know there's a lot of concern with, with those, I don't know, false positives, if you will. So how is the one that you do different, and when you get a result of there's these 5 foods that you're sensitive to, how do you move forward from that?
Yeah. So the MRT test is the difference between food sensitivities and of course allergies are going to be the ones right? You're going to get the rash, the anaphylactic, hopefully not. But sensitivities are delayed responses most of the time. And it has to do with the histamine reaction of the cells. And they're a little more delayed than eating it and not feeling well. So this test is able to kind of catch that delayed response in your immune system and in the inflammatory markers. So that's how it's a little different than, again, I don't even know what they're looking at, because it can't be a blood. I mean, I know they take blood, but I don't know what part of the blood shows up so instantly to reveal all of those foods, because it would have to be, they'll tote an IgA or an IgE reaction to food. But we know that that's not an actual true food sensitivity. So the MRT test doesn't do IgA or IgE because we've actually been able to disprove that correlation between sensitivities versus immune responses versus an allergy. It actually will test the cells, histamine delayed reaction. So it's pretty cool. But it does definitely shorten the list, but they usually do get a list back of some foods that are red. So avoid yellow, tiptoe, and green is good. So you want lots of greens, of course, but there will be some reds or even yellows. And in that sense, you then have to go through a process. And this is why you need that support and the trained person to bring you through this reintroduction phase, because that's where I find everyone gets stuck or isn't, guided appropriately. Is they'll get their answer. They have laundry lists of every food you could think of that flagged somehow. And now they're not going to eat them. When, ever again? Or what's the plan? So we have to, in functional medicine, we have this 4R approach to foods or inflammation in general. And the first is that you remove, right? So you're going to remove the triggering food. This test would help you better identify it. We know the main inflammatory foods, right? Gluten, dairy, soy, canola, corn, eggs are among the top inflammatory foods. Most people will feel better taking a break off of some of those or finding a good replacement for them, which we'll talk about later. But then it could be as specific as spinach could be posting high for somebody and they're having a spinach egg white omelet every morning, thinking that's the way to health. And it could just be that overload that they're feeling and their joint pain and stuff like that. So we can essentially, you'd pull them out for a period of 21 days. Usually it's about 3 weeks that you'll take off of any sort of triggering food. And then you'll reintroduce them one at a time every 3 or so days following. So we usually take out a calendar and we start writing food names in it. But it's a pretty, calculated process. But the idea is just that you don't stay off them forever. We need to figure out the issue with why we're reacting a certain way to certain foods, why the bloating, why the gas, why the constipation, why the belching, why our skin is freaking out. So that's kind of where that stool test would come in. Is there some overgrowth? Is there an imbalance? Is there an inability to break these foods down present that we can address that? And then the idea is that we can bring the spinach back 4 weeks later. We take a break, we let the inflammation cool, and then we reintroduce foods in a less inflammatory state, which is also important because I find that people will coordinate foods together. They're in an inflamed state, and they then have, blueberry yogurt, right? Or yogurt with blueberries in it. And their stomach hurts a couple hours later and they're like, oh, now I can't have blueberries. And it must be the yogurt. It must be blueberries because I don't feel good right now. but the person was already in such an inflamed place coming into it. So it's almost like you're not giving yourself a fair chance. And then I watched that person add blueberries and yogurt to their list of cannot have foods. And we go in this cycle of being in an inflamed, uncomfortable place, trying to eat because we're hungry, and then adding that food to our list. So we need to take out the foods that we know or can assume to be inflammatory, let the body kind of rest a little bit. When we're inflamed, we picture like this red pulsing system, and we just want it to cool off and just be able to tolerate and accept foods again. So there's some things we can do as far as, healing agents. We can add in lots of like good bone broth and L-glutamine and some nice healing gut products, or, using the bone broth. People sip on it. They use it to make their rice. They use it to make soups, and just really incorporating some really gut focused foods. Seal up that lining, because the cell around our gut or the lining around it is only one cell thick. So it's super penetrable, and it's just very vulnerable, I guess, our gut. So of course, a lot of things can like poke and prod at it, and which one's strong enough, how much re-exposure to it does it finally get through and kind of cause that reaction and that discomfort. So yeah, you take out the triggers for a period of 3 weeks, and then you'll start to plot how you reintroduce them. And I've seen nothing but the ability to reintroduce them. People are able to eat gluten again, sparingly, because I don't necessarily believe gluten needs to be a staple in anyone's diet, but it sometimes feels like a death sentence, right? Like I'm never going to be able to have X again. And that's really scary. We're seeing a lot of food insecurity and like eating disordered thinking now with the sensitivity talk, and the IBS symptoms in general are pushing people really down that restrictive, not much left situation. And it's a mental battle to come out of it and even be willing to reintroduce, because you're so scared of feeling so terrible.
Yeah, and it's definitely a downward spiral that you can get into pretty quickly. And one thing that you mentioned with the sensitivity testing that you do that kind of piqued my interest. So you said it's a delayed histamine response.
Mm-hmm.
So just out of curiosity, do you know how long that delay could be, like hours or days?
It could be, anywhere from hours to days. And that's the thing, like, how are you going to catch that? Because that's why we're blaming the blueberry for the thing 2 days ago. So
right.
So that's the test, don't guess thing too with me is, again, we can't assume a lot of things, but what if it was the spinach, poor thing I've just used so much, but what if it was, and that was the 2 days ago, we'd never know. So we're just going to keep circling kind of like how that person's been doing for so long. And I'm just trying to cut that time frame in half because they've been trying so hard for so long. So that's one helpful area to be able to just get in front of it.
Yeah. And I'm definitely guilty of falling into that trap of like, okay, I ate this and I felt bad, even though that thing could definitely not have had anything to do with it. It was just, the thing that pushed you over the edge. And yeah, you end up with this long list of stuff you think you can eat. And then it's like, great, now what do I do? And then the stress makes stuff.
You have the most like overwhelming consuming thoughts, because the food is the only thing we do consistently, right? Is eat. And then when that area of your life gets shaken up, it's so stressful. It's all you think about.
It is. So one thing that you do as part of your functional medicine approach is you have people journal. And so what are some things that you ask people to track or to write down or to start being mindful of when you have them do that, and what can you find out?
Yeah. The first thing I have someone do before I even start working with them is fill out a symptom survey, which I find so informative. It's a lot of answers for my end as the interpreter, but for the patient as well. So it will list every area, I guess, of the body. So GI stuff, head stuff, skin things, nasal, all the different areas, and any possible symptom that might be part of it. And you score it from 1 to 5, maybe. And you get a final tally of your score at the end. But it's interesting to see on my end, again, as far as the answers go, I know if you're saying there's some extra like post-nasal drip all the time alongside all these belly things, I can think it's something else. Like I can try to see, again, without the testing, kind of what the theme is, what's going on with this person. Is it skin stuff? Is it etc.? But you as the patient get a lot of insight into yourself and into this place that I call like comfortable misery for people, where they just go day to day with these feelings, with the post-nasal drip. They're like, oh, I thought that was normal. Like, doesn't everybody have that little all the time? Like they're always just clearing their throat, or, have that annoying rash on their hand every season. Like they're like, oh, it's just normal. Like I've had that for 10 years. I would love to argue that it's not normal and we need to figure out why this is happening. So I love a symptom survey because it's really eye-opening for them, gives me a lot of answers and a lot of good places to work from. And I love that number. So the number that the score is, sometimes in the hundreds, like high 60 plus for sure. And we can get it down to 20, 17, 9 after like 3 months of just really working on gut health. And that's life-changing for people because they almost forget that they were sniffling all the time. And that's a fun place for us too, to show, like, look at what you've done, just as far as tangible, like, look what's changed and improved for you. So people are focused on like weight and, of course, like not going to the bathroom every 2 seconds. Those are big changers because you can physically see them. But when you start to pinpoint all the little things that add up to the chronic headaches and all of those things that are on the symptom survey, it's really cool to be able to see the other areas that are connected. So we always do that first. And then as far as continual journaling, we'll do, for my IBS patients specifically, we got to do a food journal at the beginning for sure, just to kind of see themes. I'm looking for that delayed exposure or when the symptoms coming in on my end. So they'll put corresponding times as well as symptoms when they do occur, and the timing of those as well. I feel like the time is very important from my angle. And we'll track bowel movements for sure. I want 3 a day. 1 definitely first thing in the morning. I'm very happy. 3 a day, I would love that. That's like healthy. 3 good ones though, because you got people who are going a million times. And then I do have them score their sleep and their stress, because I know that influence on overall GI health in general. And I think there's really a lot of power in taking pen to paper, keeping yourself accountable, and almost just the repetition of doing so, the commitment that people have when they do journal. Obviously so insightful for us to see what they're taking in and how we can play with that a little bit. But I think on their level, it's really helpful as far as like a commitment to themselves, a mental, reminder and accountability. So I really like journaling in that aspect.
Yeah, and going back to that survey you were talking about, I don't know if I did yours or if I did another one that was similar. And there was so much stuff on there. I'm like, wait, this matters? Like, what? This has a connection?
Yeah.
I mean, my dry eyes are not just because I have dry eyes. Like, what the heck is
Right.
So that
I
was
love it. I love it. Yes. No, functional medicine is very detailed. And yeah, people will come back to me all the time after they fill out like my intake form. It's probably like 20 pages long. And they're like, why would you ask me about that? I'm like, I will show you where that comes in. And we're able to really pinpoint how everything's interconnected. I think we've just spent so long in medicine isolating variables. Even GI, you see a GI doctor, right? And they might be really good at the upper part and not great at the bottom part. And then you go to somebody else and no one's talking to each other. So we're missing stuff and we're not connecting, the gut and the brain and the toxins and, let alone the food half of it. So I think it's really cool to see the overlap of a lot of things there in that survey. It kind of shows you.
Test, don't guess. That simple phrase can save you time, energy, and a ton of frustration, because guessing often leads you down a path that does not solve the real problem. If you don't have access to a functional doctor or the testing that you need, focus on the basics. Start by healing and strengthening your gut lining. Add high-quality bone broth to your routine. Use real extra virgin olive oil. Include gut-supporting spices like clove and cinnamon. And treat your gut with the care that it deserves while you work to uncover the root cause. And make sure to check out Amanda's site. She's doing some truly next-level stuff in the gut health space. Well, I hope this episode reminded you that we cannot just trust the marketing around health. We have to think critically, go back to the basics, and look for simple, real solutions. Because most of the time, the simple answer is the right one. So take action, stay empowered, and I'll see you next time. Okay, now before you pop off, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the one episode that could change your life. And give us a 5-star review if you learned something new today. If you want to check out all the awesome free guides, templates, and resources I've given away on this podcast, go to theneurodietitian.com/resources. You can grab anything you want, but only if you'll do it. Because information without implementation is worthless. And here at the Empowered Edge, we're action takers, not excuse makers.